The year was 2187 when the ESS Magellan, Earth's first and only interstellar vessel, made contact with the expansionist Galactic Imperium. After nearly a century of painstaking advancements in technology and exploration, humanity was eager to establish friendly relations with their cosmic neighbors. But the meeting did not go as planned. As the Magellan approached the edge of Imperium space, it was immediately surrounded by a fleet of massive warships, their energy weapons charged and aimed at the comparatively small and outdated human vessel. A hail came through the communications array, a towering holographic figure appearing on the bridge of the Magellan. "This is Supreme Admiral Thrax of the Galactic Imperium. You have entered sovereign Imperium space without authorization. Surrender your vessel and prepare to be boarded or be destroyed." The alien's voice was cold and authoritative, brooking no argument. Captain Sarah Minato, a seasoned officer in her mid-40s, stood her ground. "I am Captain Sarah Minato of the Earth Space Service Magellan. We come in peace, seeking to establish diplomatic relations with your people. We mean you no harm." Thrax let out a mocking laugh. "Diplomatic relations. Humans are nothing but primitive savages, unfit to join the Imperium. You will submit to our rule, or be crushed." Minato's jaw tightened. "That is unacceptable. The people of Earth have worked hard to advance our civilization. We have much to offer the galaxy. I urge you to reconsider your position. Your offers mean nothing to us." Thrax sneered. "You will comply, or be destroyed. You have 60 of your primitive seconds to decide." Minato turned to her crew, her expression grim. "Raise shields. Power up all weapon systems. If they open fire, we fight." The bridge erupted in a flurry of activity as the crew scrambled to their stations. Alarms blared, and the forward view screen showed the Imperium warships powering up their fearsome plasma cannons. "Captain, sensors detect the Imperium vessels charging their main weapons," her first officer, Commander James Ellison, reported. "They're locking onto us." Minato gripped the arms of her chair. "All hands, brace for impact." In the span of a heartbeat, the Imperium ships unleashed a devastating barrage. Brilliant bolts of superheated plasma slammed into the Magellan's shields, the ancient vessel rocking violently under the assault. Shields down to 60% and falling. Ellison shouted. "Hull integrity compromised on decks 4 and 5. Return fire, all batteries." Minato ordered. "Target their weapons, systems, and engines." The Magellan's phased plasma cannons sprang to life, lancing out toward the enemy fleet. Several Imperium ships were struck, their shields flickering and hull plating glowing from the impacts. But the Magellan was hopelessly outmatched, its armaments paling in comparison to the Imperium's superior firepower. "Captain, we can't take much more of this," Ellison warned. "We need to jump to FTL, now." Minato gritted her teeth, knowing their only hope of survival lay in a desperate retreat. "Helm, plot a jump to the nearest inhabitable system. As soon as the jump drive is spooled up, get us out of here." Aye, Captain," the helmsman responded, his fingers flying across the console. The Magellan shuddered as another volley of plasma fire slammed into its battered shields. Lights flickered, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of scorched circuitry. "Jump drive charging, Captain. 30 seconds to maximum output." Minato steeled herself. "Hold them off as long as you can." The bridge crew worked feverishly, pouring every ounce of the Magellan's diminishing power into its defensive systems. But the Imperium ships relentlessly pounded away, inch by inch wearing down the human vessel's resistance. 10 seconds to jump, the helmsman shouted. Minato braced herself, her knuckles white, as she gripped the armrests. "All hands, brace for jump." In a blinding flash of light, the Magellan tore a hole in the fabric of space-time, disappearing from the Imperium's grasp just as their final volley of plasma fire slammed into the ship's aft shields, causing them to collapse in a brilliant explosion. The Magellan emerged from the FTL jump thousands of light-years away, its systems critically damaged, and the crew shaken but alive. Minato let out a ragged breath, her eyes narrowing as she stared into the void. "Set a course for Earth," she commanded, her voice tinged with determination. "We have to warn them. The Imperium will be coming, and we need to prepare." As the Magellan limped home, its captain knew that the days of peace were over. A new era of conflict was dawning, one in which the fate of humanity hung in the balance, and she was determined to do whatever it took to ensure their survival. The news of the Magellan's harrowing encounter with the Galactic Imperium sent shockwaves through the governments of Earth. For decades, humanity had dreamed of joining the greater galactic community, but now they faced the stark reality of subjugation at the hands of a powerful, unforgiving empire. In the aftermath of the Magellan's return, Captain Sarah Minato delivered a dire warning to the United Earth Council. "The Imperium will not stop until they have conquered our world and enslaved our people. We must prepare for war." The council chambers erupted in a cacophony of voices, fear and outrage mingling in equal measure. Some called for immediate surrender, while others demanded a mobilization of Earth's meager military resources. But Minato knew that conventional forces would be no match for the Imperium's technological superiority. "We cannot win this fight through brute force," Minato stated, her voice cutting through the din. "But we may have a chance if we strike at them with cunning and precision." She laid out her plan: to steal the Magellan and use its advanced stealth systems and firepower to lead a daring rebellion against the Imperium's occupation. It was a risky gambit, but one Minato believed was their only hope for freedom. The council was skeptical, but Minato's reputation and the urgency of the situation eventually won them over. Grudgingly, they granted her the resources and authority she needed to assemble a crack team of pilots, engineers, and soldiers, the best Earth had to offer. As word of the Magellan's impending mutiny spread, a groundswell of support began to build among the populace. Ordinary citizens, tired of Imperium oppression, flocked to Minato's cause, donating supplies, funds, and even their lives to the burgeoning rebellion. In the shadows of Earth's great cities, cells of resistance fighters began to form, plotting sabotage and guerrilla attacks against Imperium installations and patrols. The Magellan became a symbol of hope, its crew lionized as heroes willing to risk everything for the freedom of their homeworld. Minato knew that time was not on their side. The Imperium would inevitably discover their plans, and when they did, the full might of their military machine would descend upon Earth. The Magellan had to be ready to strike first. In the bowels of a secret military base, Minato and her hand-picked crew worked tirelessly to prepare the aging vessel for its daring escape. They stripped the Magellan down to its core systems, upgrading the engines, shields, and weapons to the limits of their capabilities. Specialized stealth and countermeasure systems were installed, giving the ship a fighting chance against the Imperium's technological superiority. As the months passed, the Magellan was transformed from a relic of a bygone era into a lethal instrument of liberation. Minato drilled her crew relentlessly, pushing them to the brink of exhaustion. She knew that every second counted, and that the future of humanity rested on their shoulders. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. Imperium patrols had grown more frequent, and reports indicated that the occupation forces were tightening their grip on the populace. Minato knew they could delay no longer. "All hands, this is the captain." Minato's voice echoed through the ship's intercom. "In a few hours, we will embark on the most important mission of our lives. The fate of Earth hangs in the balance, and we are the only ones who can save it." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "We will be outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. But we have something the Imperium does not: the will to be free. Today we reclaim our home and strike a blow for the future of humanity." A cheer rose up from the crew, their faces alight with determination. Minato allowed herself a small smile, knowing that she had forged them into a formidable team, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the Magellan's engines roared to life, Minato took one last look at the planet she had sworn to protect. "Hang on, Earth," she whispered. "We're coming." With a thunderous liftoff, the Magellan tore through the atmosphere, its sleek hull cutting through the sky like a silver arrow. Alarms blared as Imperium defense systems locked onto the renegade vessel, but the Magellan's upgraded shields easily deflected their feeble attacks. Minato gripped the arms of her chair, her eyes fixed on the viewscreen as the Magellan hurtled towards the edge of the solar system. "Plot a course for the Tau Ceti system," she commanded. "We'll regroup and plan our next move from there." As the familiar stars gave way to the endless void of interstellar space, Minato allowed herself a moment of reflection. The journey ahead would be long and perilous, but she knew that her crew was ready. They would do whatever it took to liberate Earth, no matter the cost. "Hold on, my home," Minato whispered. "We're coming to set you free." The Magellan hurtled through the vastness of space, its fusion engines straining to propel the ancient vessel to the limits of its capabilities. Behind them, a swarm of Imperium warships gave chase, their formidable plasma cannons pounding the ship's increasingly battered shields. On the bridge, Captain Sarah Minato stood resolute, her eyes narrowed in concentration as she barked orders to her increasingly overwhelmed crew. "Divert all non-essential power to the engines and shields," she commanded. "We need to put as much distance between us and that Imperium fleet as possible." The bridge erupted in a flurry of activity as the crew scrambled to comply. Lights dimmed, and the familiar hum of the Magellan's systems grew strained, but the ship's speed increased noticeably. "Shields down to 50% and falling," reported Commander Ellison, his brow furrowed with concern. "At this rate, we won't be able to maintain them much longer." Minato's jaw tightened. "Keep pouring everything we've got into them. Losing those shields would be a death sentence." The Magellan shuddered as another salvo of plasma fire slammed into its aft section, sending sparks cascading across the bridge. Minato braced herself against the railing, her knuckles white. "Damage to decks 8 through 12, Ellison called out. "Hull integrity compromised. We can't take much more of this." Minato's mind raced, searching for a solution. They were outmatched, outgunned, and running out of options. But she refused to give up, not when the fate of Earth hung in the balance. "Open a channel to the Imperium fleet," she ordered. Ellison looked at her, bewildered. "Captain, are you sure that's wise?" "Just do it," Minato snapped. A moment later, the towering holographic figure of Supreme Admiral Thrax appeared on the viewscreen, his eyes narrowed with triumph. "Captain Minato," the alien commander sneered. "I must say, I'm impressed by your tenacity, but your futile attempts to escape are only prolonging the inevitable." Minato stood tall, unflinching in the face of her enemy. "Thrax, call off your ships. Let us go, and we'll spare you the trouble of hunting us down." Thrax let out a booming laugh. "Spare me? You are in no position to make demands, human. Your pathetic vessel is on its last legs. Surrender now, and I may grant you a swift death." Minato's eyes narrowed. "That's not going to happen. We will fight to the last, and when we're done, your precious Imperium will be nothing but ashes." Thrax's expression darkened. "Then you will all die here, like the dogs you are." The channel closed, and the Imperium ships resumed their relentless assault. Minato turned to her crew, her gaze resolute. "Helm, plot a course for the nearest inhabitable system. Once we're out of weapons range, engage the jump drive." Aye, Captain," the helmsman replied, his fingers dancing across the console. As the Magellan pushed itself to its limits, the Imperium ships closed in, their plasma cannons blazing. Minato gripped the arms of her chair, her teeth gritted against the strain. "Shields down to 30% and dropping." Ellison shouted. "We won't be able to maintain them much longer." Minato's eyes scanned the bridge, taking in the faces of her crew. They were battered, bruised, and exhausted, but their determination had not wavered. She knew they would fight to the bitter end. "All hands, prepare for jump," she announced, her voice steady. "On my mark." The Imperium ships closed in, their weapons charging for a final devastating salvo. Minato steeled herself, her hand poised over the jump drive controls. Mark. In a blinding flash of light, the Magellan tore through the fabric of space-time, disappearing from the Imperium's grasp just as their plasma fire slammed into the ship's failing shields. The alien warships were left to drift in the void, their prey having slipped through their fingers. The Magellan emerged from the jump thousands of light-years away, its systems in critical condition. Smoke billowed from damaged conduits, and the crew was battered and bruised, but they were alive. Minato let out a ragged breath, her shoulders sagging with relief. Report. Ellison quickly assessed the damage. Shields are down, engines are running at 70%, and we've got hull breaches on multiple decks. But we made it. Minato nodded, her gaze sweeping across the bridge. Well done, all of you. You've done Earth proud. A cheer went up from the crew, their spirits buoyed by their harrowing escape. Minato allowed herself a small smile, but she knew that their troubles were far from over. Set a course for the Tau Ceti system, she commanded. We'll need to make repairs and regroup. And then, her expression hardened, we'll start planning our next move against the Imperium. As the Magellan limped through the void, Minato couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The Imperium would not rest until they had hunted down and destroyed the renegade vessel, but she was determined to prove them wrong, to forge a path to freedom for Earth and all those who had fallen under the Imperium's oppressive rule. This was only the beginning of their fight for survival. The Magellan limped through the vast expanse of uncharted space, its battered hull and damaged systems a testament to the ferocity of its recent encounter with the Galactic Imperium. Captain Sarah Minato stood on the bridge, her eyes narrowed with a mix of determination and trepidation. How long until we reach the Tau Ceti system? She asked, her gaze fixed on the view screen. At our current speed, approximately 3 days, Captain, the helmsman replied, his voice strained. Minato nodded, her mind racing. The Imperium would not rest until they had hunted down and destroyed the renegade Magellan. She knew they had to move quickly, to find a safe haven where they could make the necessary repairs and regroup. Increase power to the engines, she ordered. We need to shave as much time off that journey as possible. The crew sprang into action, diverting every available watt of energy towards the Magellan's propulsion systems. The ancient vessel groaned and shuddered, but its speed gradually increased, cutting the estimated travel time by nearly a full day. As the Magellan drew closer to the Tau Ceti system, Minato's tension only grew. She had chosen this destination for its remote location and the presence of a small independent colony that might be willing to offer them aid. But she knew that the Imperium would be searching for them, and that their pursuers were likely far more advanced in both technology and resources. Captain, sensors are detecting a massive energy signature emerging from hyperspace, the sensor officer reported, his voice tinged with alarm. It's the Imperium fleet. Minato's heart sank. How long until they reach our position? At their current speed, less than an hour, the officer replied grimly. Minato gritted her teeth, her mind racing. They were in no condition to engage the Imperium in combat, not with the Magellan systems barely holding together. They needed to buy time, to find a way to slip past the enemy fleet undetected. All hands, prepare for evasive maneuvers, she announced, her voice calm and commanding. Helm, plot a course through the nearest asteroid field. We'll use the debris to mask our signature and hopefully slip past their sensors. The crew sprang into action, their fingers flying across their consoles as they carried out Minato's instructions. The Magellan's engines roared to life, the battered vessel surging forward towards the dense asteroid field that lay ahead. As the Imperium ships emerged from hyperspace, their massive plasma cannons already charging, the Magellan plunged into the field, weaving between the tumbling rocks and debris with skill and precision. Maintain stealth systems at maximum, Minato ordered, her eyes fixed on the view screen. If they so much as catch a glimpse of us, we're done for. The bridge was tense and silent, save for the occasional crackle of static from the communications array as the Imperium ships broadcast their demands for the Magellan's surrender. Minato ignored them, her focus entirely on the treacherous path ahead. Suddenly, the lights on the bridge flickered, and the ship shuddered violently. "What was that?" Minato demanded, her heart pounding. "We've been hit by debris," the helmsman reported, his face pale. "Shields down to 20% and falling. We can't take much more of this." Minato's jaw tightened. "Divert all remaining power to the engines and thrusters. Get us out of this field. Now." The Magellan surged forward, its engines straining as it navigated the treacherous asteroid field. But the damage was taking its toll, and Minato knew they couldn't keep this up for long. "Captain, the Imperium ships are closing in," Ellison shouted. "They've detected our signature and are moving to intercept." Minato gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white. "Helm, get us to the nearest habitable planet. Now. We need to find a place to make repairs and regroup." The Magellan shot out of the asteroid field, its engines burning bright as it raced towards the distant blue-green world that lay ahead. But the Imperium fleet was in hot pursuit, their massive warships closing in with every passing second. "We're not going to make it," Ellison said grimly. "Their weapons are locking onto us." Minato set her jaw, her eyes narrowing with determination. "Then we fight. Arm all weapons and prepare to engage the enemy." The bridge crews sprang into action, their fingers flying across their consoles as they readied the Magellan's battered armaments. Minato knew that their chances of survival were slim, but she refused to go down without a fight. As the Imperium ships bore down on them, their plasma cannons blazing, Minato took a deep breath and steeled herself for the inevitable. All hands braced for impact. The Magellan rocked under the barrage of fire, its shields flickering and failing as the Imperium warships unleashed their full fury. Minato braced herself against the railing, her eyes fixed on the view screen as the world ahead grew ever closer. "We're not going to make it," Ellison whispered, his face etched with despair. But Minato refused to give up. "Keep firing," she ordered, her voice unwavering. "We'll show them that the people of Earth are not to be trifled with." The Magellan's weapons blazed, its phased plasma cannons lancing out at the Imperium ships. Explosions rocked the enemy vessels, but their sheer numbers and firepower were too much for the battered human ship to withstand. As the Magellan hurtled towards the distant planet, Minato knew that their time had run out. But she also knew that their fight was far from over. With one final, defiant glare at the pursuing Imperium fleet, she prepared to take her ship and her crew on one final, desperate gambit. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and Minato was determined to do whatever it took to ensure its survival. As the battered Magellan hurtled towards the distant planet, Captain Sarah Minato stared out at the pursuing Imperium fleet with a grim determination. They were outmatched, outgunned, and on the verge of destruction, but she refused to give up. "Helm, prepare for a controlled crash landing," she ordered, her voice calm and steady. "We need to get to the surface in one piece." The crew sprang into action, their fingers flying across the consoles as they fought to stabilize the reeling ship. Alarms blared, and the bridge shook violently as the Magellan plunged through the planet's atmosphere. Braced for impact, Minato shouted, gripping the arms of her chair as the ship careened towards the ground below. With a deafening crash, the Magellan slammed into the planet's surface, its hull crumpling and buckling under the immense force of the landing. Minato was thrown from her seat, her vision blurring as she collided with the bulkhead. When she finally regained her senses, the bridge was a scene of chaos and devastation. Smoke billowed from damaged conduits, and the crew lay battered and bruised, struggling to pull themselves from the wreckage. "Report," Minato croaked, her voice hoarse. Ellison, his face streaked with blood, staggered to his feet. "Engines are offline, shields are down, and we've got breaches on multiple decks. But we're alive." Minato nodded, her gaze sweeping across the battered bridge. "Get the damage control teams working. We need to secure the ship and get the injured to the medical bay." As the crew sprang into action, Minato turned her attention to the view screen, where the Imperium fleet hovered menacingly above the planet's surface. She knew that it was only a matter of time before they launched a ground assault, and they needed to be ready. "Raise what's left of our shields and prepare the remaining weapon systems," she ordered. "We're going to need every ounce of firepower we can muster." But even as the crew worked tirelessly to prepare the Magellan for the coming battle, Minato couldn't help but feel a sense of despair. They were far from Earth, with no way to warn their homeworld of the Imperium's impending onslaught. "Captain," Ellison said, his expression grave, "we need to get a message to Earth. They need to know what's happening, and they need to start preparing for the Imperium's arrival." Minato nodded, her mind racing. "Assemble a team of our best technicians and engineers. I want them to build the long-range transmitter, something powerful enough to reach Earth." As the crew set to work, Minato turned her attention to the viewport, her eyes narrowing as she watched the Imperium ships descend towards the planet's surface. She knew that they had little time left, and that the fate of humanity hung in the balance. "We need to rally the local population," she said, her voice resolute. "If we're going to have any chance of surviving this, we're going to need their help." Minato quickly dispatched a team of her most trusted officers to the planet's surface, tasked with making contact with the local authorities and rallying the people to their cause. As they made their way down to the planet, she couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. If the people of this world were willing to join their fight, then perhaps they could turn the tide against the Imperium. Perhaps they could find a way to not only survive, but to strike back against their oppressors. The hours ticked by, and the Imperium troops began to deploy, their fearsome war machines rumbling across the landscape. Minato watched, her jaw set with determination, as the battle lines were drawn. And then, a faint signal began to register on the Magellan sensors, growing stronger with each passing minute. Minato's heart swelled with hope as she recognized the source. "The transmitter is online," Ellison reported, his voice filled with relief. "We're sending the message to Earth now." Minato nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Good work, Commander. Now let's hope they're listening." As the message was transmitted, Minato turned her attention back to the unfolding battle, her eyes narrowing with anticipation. The Imperium troops were advancing, their weapons blazing, but the local militia was putting up a surprisingly fierce resistance. "Captain, the planet's inhabitants are rallying to our cause," Ellison reported, his voice tinged with awe. "They're coordinating their attacks, using the terrain to their advantage." Minato felt a surge of pride. "Then let's give them some help. Bring the Magellan's weapon systems online and target the Imperium's ground forces." The ancient ship's plasma cannons roared to life, raining destruction down upon the Imperium's troops and vehicles. The local militia cheered, their morale bolstered by the arrival of the Magellan's formidable firepower. As the battle raged on, Minato couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism. If the people of this world were willing to fight alongside them, then perhaps they had a chance of turning the tide against the Imperium. "This is just the beginning," Minato murmured, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "The call to arms has been sounded, and the galaxy will answer." With a renewed sense of purpose, she turned her attention back to the battle, determined to do whatever it took to ensure the survival of her crew, her homeworld, and all those who sought to be free from the Imperium's oppressive rule. The ground trembled beneath the Magellan's battered hull as the battle for the planet raged on. Captain Sarah Minato watched from the bridge, her eyes narrowed with fierce determination. Their ragtag alliance of local militia and the Magellan's crew had managed to hold the Imperium forces at bay for now, but she knew it was only a matter of time before the enemy's superior firepower overwhelmed them. "Status report," Minato barked, her gaze sweeping across the bridge. "Shields holding at 40%, Ellison replied, his fingers flying across his console. "Weapons systems at 80% capacity. We can't keep this up much longer." Minato's jaw tightened. "We have to." This is our only chance to send a message to Earth, a message that will inspire them to rise up against the Imperium's occupation." Ellison nodded, his expression grim. "I've been monitoring the planet's communication networks. The word of our stand is spreading rapidly. If we can just hold out a little longer, the local populace might be convinced to join the fight." "Then that's what we'll do," Minato declared, her voice steady and resolute. "Redirect all non-essential power to the shields and weapons. I want this ship ready to unleash hell on those Imperium bastards." The bridge crews sprang into action, their faces set with determination. Minato watched as the Magellan's systems surged back to life, the ancient vessel's formidable arsenal roaring to life. Locking onto the Imperium's forward assault, the weapons officer reported, firing plasma cannons. Brilliant bolts of superheated plasma lanced out from the Magellan, slamming into the Imperium's advancing war machines. Explosions rocked the ground, and the enemy's formation faltered, their momentum slowed by the unexpected fury of the human defenders. "Direct hits on enemy armored vehicles," the officer shouted. "They're falling back." Minato allowed herself a small, grim smile. "Keep up the pressure. We can't let them regroup." The battle raged on, with the Magellan and its allies inflicting heavy casualties on the Imperium forces. But Minato knew that their triumph would be short-lived. The enemy's overwhelming numbers and technological superiority would inevitably overwhelm them. As if on cue, a massive Imperium warship emerged from the clouds, its weapon systems powering up. Minato gripped the arms of her chair, bracing herself for the devastating assault. "Shields at 20% and falling," Ellison warned. "We won't be able to withstand another barrage like that." Minato's mind raced, searching for a way to turn the tide of the battle. And then an idea struck her. "Helm, plot a course directly for that warship," she ordered. "Maximum thrust." The helmsman stared at her, aghast. "Captain, you can't be serious. That's suicide." Minato's expression hardened. "Do it. Trust me." Reluctantly, the helmsman complied, and the Magellan surged forward, hurtling towards the massive Imperium vessel. "All hands, brace for impact," Minato shouted, her voice ringing out across the bridge. The Imperium warship opened fire, its plasma cannons unleashing a devastating barrage. The Magellan's shields flickered and collapsed, and the ancient vessel shook violently under the onslaught. But Minato remained unflinching, her eyes fixed on the target. "Helm, on my mark. Engage the jump drive." The helmsman's fingers flew across his console, his face etched with fear and uncertainty. "Mark." In a blinding flash of light, the Magellan tore through the fabric of space-time, disappearing from the Imperium's grasp, just as their final volley of plasma fire slammed into the ship's aft section. The Magellan emerged from the jump light years away, its systems critically damaged and its crew battered and bruised. Minato staggered to her feet, her eyes sweeping across the bridge. "Report," she rasped, her voice hoarse from the strain. Ellison grimaced, his expression grim. "We've sustained heavy damage, Captain. Engines are offline, and we've got multiple hull breaches. Half the crew are injured, some critically." Minato's jaw tightened, but she refused to give in to despair. "Get the repair teams working. We need to get this ship back into fighting shape as soon as possible." As the crew scrambled to carry out her orders, Minato turned her attention to the view screen, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We may have escaped the Imperium for now, but our fight is far from over. Earth is still in their clutches, and we need to find a way to liberate it." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "And we will, no matter what it takes." In the days that followed, the Magellan's crew worked tirelessly to repair the battered vessel, drawing on the limited resources of the nearby colony world to restore its systems to full functionality. And as the news of their daring stand against the Imperium spread, Minato's comm channels were flooded with messages of support and offers of aid from other worlds, all eager to join the growing resistance against the Empire's tyrannical rule. Minato knew that the path to victory would be long and arduous, but she also knew that they had no choice but to fight. The fate of Earth and the future of humanity hung in the balance, and she was determined to do whatever it took to ensure that the Magellan would rise again and lead the charge to liberate their homeworld from the clutches of the Imperium. As the Magellan limped through the void of space, its damaged systems slowly being repaired by the dedicated crew, Captain Sarah Minato pored over the latest intelligence reports, her brow furrowed in concentration. The news from Earth was deeply troubling. In the wake of the Magellan's daring escape, the Imperium had tightened its grip on the homeworld, cracking down on any sign of resistance with ruthless efficiency. Minato knew that their window of opportunity was closing, and that they needed to act quickly if they had any hope of liberating Earth. "Captain, the repairs are progressing ahead of schedule," Commander Ellison reported, interrupting Minato's thoughts. "The weapons and propulsion systems are back online, and the shields are at 80% capacity." Minato nodded, her expression grim. "Good. We'll need every ounce of firepower we can muster for what's to come." Ellison's gaze hardened. "You've been in contact with the other worlds, haven't you? I can see it in your eyes. You have a plan." Minato allowed herself a small, weary smile. "I do, and it's a risky one. But I believe it's our only chance to turn the tide against the Imperium." She gestured to the holographic display on the bridge, which showed the position of the Magellan and the surrounding star systems. "We've made contact with several worlds that have also suffered under the Imperium's rule. They're willing to join us in our fight for freedom." Ellison's eyes widened. "You mean to forge an alliance? To unite these disparate worlds against the Imperium's might?" Minato nodded. "Precisely. The Magellan will be the centerpiece of this alliance, a symbol of hope and a rallying point for all those who seek to overthrow the Imperium's tyranny." Ellison's brow furrowed. "But how can we hope to defeat the Imperium's vast military machine? They have the resources, the technology, the sheer numbers to crush any resistance." Minato's expression hardened. "We have something the Imperium doesn't: the will to be free. And when we unite the strength of these worlds, we'll have the numbers and the firepower to strike back against our oppressors." She turned to face Ellison, her eyes burning with determination. "We may be outmatched, but we're not outmatched in spirit. And that, my friend, is what will ultimately turn the tide of this war." Ellison nodded slowly, the beginnings of a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Then let's get to work. We have a galaxy to liberate." In the days and weeks that followed, the Magellan became the centerpiece of a rapidly growing alliance of worlds, each one contributing its own resources, technology, and skilled personnel to the cause. Minato and her crew worked tirelessly, forging new partnerships and coordinating the efforts of their disparate allies. As the news of the Magellan's exploits spread, more and more worlds joined the resistance, their people inspired by the bravery and determination of the renegade vessel and its crew. Minato watched with a sense of pride as the alliance grew, its strength and resolve hardening with each passing day. "We're ready," Minato announced one day, as she stood before the assembled leaders of the alliance. "The time has come to strike back against the Imperium, to reclaim our freedom and our place in the galaxy." The gathered leaders nodded, their faces set with determination. "Then let the assault begin," one of them declared, his voice ringing with conviction. In a coordinated series of attacks, the Alliance's forces struck at the heart of the Imperium's occupation, targeting key installations and supply lines across multiple fronts. The Magellan, its systems fully restored, led the charge, its powerful weapons systems raining destruction upon the enemy's defenses. As the battle raged on, Minato watched from the bridge, her eyes narrowed with focus. She knew that this was only the beginning, that the road to victory would be long and arduous. But she also knew that they had no choice but to fight, that the future of humanity depended on their success. "Hold the line, my friends," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of the battle. "Victory is within our grasp." The Alliance's forces fought with a ferocity born of desperation and determination, pushing back the Imperium's troops and steadily reclaiming ground. Minato could feel the tide turning, the balance of power shifting in their favor. And then, in a moment that would be etched into the annals of history, the Magellan and its allied fleet reached the Imperium's final stronghold, their weapons blazing as they struck a decisive blow against the heart of the enemy's military might. As the smoke cleared and the cheers of the victorious Alliance echoed through the void of space, Minato stood on the bridge of the Magellan, her eyes shining with pride and triumph. "We did it," she whispered, a smile spreading across her face. "Earth is free." But even as the Alliance celebrated their hard-won victory, Minato knew that their work was far from done. The Imperium's collapse had left a power vacuum in the galaxy, and it would be up to them to fill that void with a new order, one built on the principles of freedom, equality, and justice. With renewed determination, Minato set her sights on the future, knowing that the Magellan and its allies would be the guardians of a new era in the galaxy, an era of peace, prosperity, and the limitless potential of a humanity finally liberated from the shackles of oppression. The dust had barely settled on the decisive victory over the Imperium's forces when Captain Sarah Minato found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. With the enemy's strongholds crumbling and their military might shattered, the newly formed Galactic Alliance was faced with the daunting task of rebuilding and restructuring the fragmented galaxy. As the commander of the Magellan, the symbol of the resistance and the linchpin of the Alliance, Minato found herself thrust into a role she had never anticipated, that of a visionary leader, charged with shaping the future of the cosmos. The Imperium's collapse has left a power vacuum. Minato addressed the gathered representatives of the Alliance's member worlds. "It is our duty to fill that void, to create a new order built on the principles of freedom, justice, and equality for all." Her words were met with a chorus of enthusiastic cheers and applause. The people of these worlds had suffered too long under the Imperium's oppressive rule, and they were eager to embrace a future free from the shackles of tyranny. Minato raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "But this task will not be an easy one. The Imperium's influence has spread far and wide, and there will be those who seek to take advantage of the chaos to further their own ambitions." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembled leaders. "We must be vigilant, and we must be unified. Only then can we ensure that the sacrifices of those who fought and died for our freedom will not be in vain." The representatives nodded solemnly, their expressions resolute. Minato felt a surge of pride at the sight of their determination, a testament to the power of the Alliance and the vision she had fought so hard to bring to fruition. In the days and weeks that followed, Minato and her crew worked tirelessly, coordinating the efforts of the Alliance's member worlds and laying the groundwork for a new galactic government. It was a daunting task, fraught with challenges and obstacles at every turn, but Minato remained steadfast in her commitment to creating a brighter future. As the Magellan traversed the stars, Minato found herself drawn to the plight of the countless worlds that had suffered under the Imperium's rule. She visited these worlds personally, meeting with their leaders and listening to their stories of oppression and resilience. And in each of these encounters, she found the same spark of hope that had ignited the resistance on her own homeworld. It was this hope that fueled Minato's determination, driving her to work tirelessly to bring the Alliance together and forge a new path forward. She knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous, but she was more than willing to shoulder the burden for the sake of her crew, her homeworld, and all those who dared to dream of a future free from tyranny. As the months passed, the Magellan became a symbol of the Alliance's power and influence, a beacon of hope that drew in more and more worlds to the cause. Minato watched with a growing sense of pride as the Alliance's ranks swelled, its military might and technological capabilities expanding exponentially. And then, in a decisive moment that would cement the Magellan's place in history, Minato led the Alliance's forces in a final decisive assault on the Imperium's last strongholds. The battle was fierce and bloody, but the Alliance's superior firepower and strategic coordination proved too much for the Imperium's battered remnants to withstand. As the last Imperium ships were destroyed, Minato stood on the bridge of the Magellan, her eyes shining with triumph. The galaxy had been liberated, and the Imperium's reign of terror was finally at an end. But even as the Alliance celebrated its victory, Minato knew that their work was far from over. With the Imperium gone, a power vacuum had been created, and there were those who sought to fill that void for their own gain. It would be up to the Alliance and the Magellan to ensure that the hard-won freedoms of the people were protected and preserved. And so, Minato set her sights on a new challenge, that of becoming the guardian of the galaxy, a role that the Magellan and its crew had embraced with a sense of duty and purpose. They would use the ship's formidable capabilities to patrol the vast expanse of space, intervening wherever necessary to maintain peace and stability. It was a daunting task, but Minato knew that it was one that she and her crew were more than capable of handling. After all, they had overcome insurmountable odds to liberate their homeworld and forge a new alliance. What was a little galactic diplomacy and peacekeeping in comparison? As the Magellan set out on its new mission, Minato couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. It had been a long and arduous path, filled with sacrifice and hardship, but in the end, they had emerged victorious, their triumph serving as a beacon of hope for all those who sought to live in a galaxy free from oppression. And as the stars twinkled in the vast expanse of space, Minato knew that the Magellan would always be there, a guardian and a symbol of the Alliance's unwavering commitment to a brighter future for all.